Kenpachi Zaraki is the biggest lie in Bleach. Not because he hides who he is, but because everyone else refuses to see him clearly. They look at the scars, the grin, the bells, the eye patch, and they assume he's a brute, a berserker, a man who wins through raw force alone. But the truth is so much more dangerous. Kenpachi isn't just strong, he's intelligent in the one arena that matters most to him, the battlefield. And once you understand how his mind works, you realize he's been outthinking his opponents from the very beginning. Let's start with Anoitra, because this fight exposes everything people miss about Kenpachi. At first glance, it looks like chaos, steel clashing, blood flying, two monsters tearing each other apart. But watch Kenpachi's movements. He's not swinging wildly, he's testing, probing. Every strike is a question, every block is an answer. He's measuring Anoitra's hero, he's analyzing the regeneration, he's adjusting his timing, his angles, his pressure. He's building a mental map of Anoitra's entire fighting style in real time. And when he finally decides to use two hands, it's not a power-up, it's a conclusion, a calculated decision based on everything he learned mid-fight. That's not recklessness, that's precision. And then there's Unohana, the only person who truly understood him. Their fight reveals the truth. Kenpachi has been suppressing his power his entire life, not consciously, instinctively. His brain is constantly regulating his output so he doesn't kill his opponents too quickly. Do you understand how insane that is? To suppress your own strength, you need constant awareness of your opponent's durability, your own force, the pace of the fight, the flow of the battle. Kenpachi is doing calculations in the middle of life or death combat that would break most captains' minds. He's not just fighting, he's managing himself like a living weapon. But the 1,000-year blood war is where his battle IQ becomes undeniable. Let's talk about Grimmy, a reality-warping child god who can create anything he imagines. That should be an impossible opponent, but Kenpachi immediately understands the psychological angle. He doesn't try to outthink Grimmy logically. He forces Grimmy to imagine him as an unstoppable monster. He weaponizes Grimmy's own fear. He turns Grimmy's imagination into a self-destruct button. That is psychological warfare. That is manipulation. That is strategy. But the fight that truly exposes Kenpachi's mind, the fight that proves he's not a brute, but a battlefield genius, is his encounter with Pernita. This is where people get it wrong. They think Kenpachi lost because he was dumb. No. Kenpachi lost because he was the only one willing to do what needed to be done, gather information. Pernita is a living Quincy nerve god, a creature that mutates anything it touches. No one knew how it worked. No one knew how to fight it. Someone had to step in first. Someone had to take the hits. Someone had to figure out what this thing even was. And Kenpachi does it without hesitation. He throws himself into the unknown, not because he's reckless, but because he understands the battlefield better than anyone. He knows Mayuri is behind him. He knows Mayuri can turn raw data into victory. So Kenpachi becomes the experiment, the test subject, the sacrificial scout. His injuries become Mayuri's blueprint. His suffering becomes the key to defeating Pernita. That is not stupidity. That is leadership. And then there's Gerard Valkyrie, the miracle giant. Kenpachi doesn't just swing at him blindly. He tests Gerard's durability. He tests the regeneration. He tests the limits of his own power. And when he finally unleashes Nozarashi, it's because he has enough information to know that nothing else will work. Even in the middle of a god-level battle, Kenpachi is analyzing, adapting, evolving. His mind is always running, always calculating, always learning. Kenpachi's intelligence is not academic. It's not verbal. It's not something you measure with books or tests. It's something you measure in survival, in instinct, in adaptation, in the ability to learn while bleeding, evolve while dying, and grow stronger in the middle of chaos. Kenpachi doesn't think before the fight. He thinks during the fight. His brain activates when blades cross. His mind sharpens when death is inches away. That is why he's terrifying, not because he's strong, but because he's strong and intelligent in the one arena that matters most to him, battle. Kenpachi Zaraki is not a brute. He is a genius of violence, a master of instinct, a strategist whose battlefield calculations happen faster than most people can blink. He is the embodiment of combat intelligence, raw, primal, and unstoppable. And if you still think he's stupid, then you haven't been watching him. You've only been watching the blood. And now we need to talk about Aizen, because people have spent years worshiping this man like he's some flawless mastermind, some omniscient god who planned every breath, every step, every outcome. But when you actually look at what happened, when you strip away the theatrics and the speeches, you start to see the truth. Aizen wasn't a perfect planner. He was a perfect talker, a perfect bluffer, a perfect improviser who made every mistake look intentional, and people fell for it every single time. Everyone loves to bring up Karakura Town like it was Aizen's divine showcase. They act like he could have wiped out every captain with a flick of his wrist. But that's the illusion. That's the myth he built. The reality is simple. He wasn't physically strong enough to take all of them at once. Not then. Not at that time. His Shikai was doing the heavy lifting. Complete hypnosis. Total sensory domination. They weren't terrified of his strength. They were terrified of the idea of his strength, and Aizen knew it. He weaponized perception harder than he ever weaponized power. Without Kyoka Suigetsu activated, without the illusion clouding their senses, do you really think he would have stood there and dismantled the entire Gotei 13? No, he wouldn't have. He couldn't have. But he didn't need to, because he made them believe he could. And belief is a far sharper blade than any Zanpakuto. That's the thing about Aizen. He didn't dominate with force. He dominated with confidence, with arrogance, with the absolute certainty that no matter what happened, he could talk his way into control. He didn't need to be the strongest. He just needed everyone else to hesitate. And they did, every time. Look at his fight with Shinji. Sakanade flipped his senses, and for a moment, Aizen was actually caught off guard. If he truly had everything planned, if he truly saw every outcome, that wouldn't have happened. But he adapted. He twisted the situation. He talked his way back into dominance. That's what he does. He doesn't predict the future. He bends the present. And then there's the captains. People act like he was casually slicing through them because he was leagues above them in raw power. But watch closely. He wasn't overpowering them. He was exploiting hesitation, exploiting confusion, exploiting the fact that none of them knew what was real. They weren't fighting Aizen. They were fighting their own uncertainty, their own fear, their own assumptions. Aizen didn't need to be stronger. He just needed them to doubt themselves for 1 second, and they did. People love to say he planned Ichigo's entire life, that he orchestrated every step of Ichigo's growth. But that's another lie people tell themselves to make Aizen seem untouchable. He didn't plan Ichigo. He reacted to Ichigo. He adjusted to Ichigo. He watched Ichigo evolve and then pretended he expected it all along. That's not planning. That's ego. That's performance. That's Aizen rewriting the narrative in real time. Even Gen's betrayal, the moment everyone thought would expose Aizen, didn't break him. He didn't crumble. He didn't panic. He didn't fall apart. He simply shifted, adapted, transformed. Because that's what he does. He turns every setback into a stage, every mistake into a monologue, every flaw into a flex. Aizen's power wasn't omnipotence. It was perception. His strength wasn't invincibility. It was persuasion. His genius wasn't planning. It was improvisation. He didn't need to know everything. He just needed to know more than the person standing in front of him. And he always did. Aizen didn't win because he was the strongest. He won because he convinced the world that resistance was pointless. He didn't dominate because he planned everything. He dominated because he could turn any moment into his moment. He didn't ascend because he was flawless. He ascended because even his flaws served him. Aizen wasn't a god. He just made everyone believe he was.